My video cut me off, so I will be recording this in two parts, and this is part number 2. Just to finish up what I was saying on this slide, poor immigrant communities are more likely to be lab rats because it's less likely that people in disadvantaged communities will have the time and the resources available to combat the introduction of a genetically engineered species, for example. So we need to be really concerned about whether the introduction of genetically engineered species or the use of genetically modified crops is equitable. For my personal reflection, I can see very clearly that DNA technology has a lot of potential benefits for society, whether it's the creation of hormones or vaccines or more nutrition and efficient crops or diagnosis of disease. There's a lot of advantages, and public outcry is often poorly informed. So when I was reading about the mosquito introduction, a lot of people were really concerned about the mosquitoes biting them. However, it's important to note that the male mosquitoes, which is what will be introduced, don't actually bite. However, all these things considered, I think we need to move slowly and proceed with caution because right now there isn't any long-term data. So while our knowledge of genetics is increasing every day, we still don't know everything, and we don't know about the longitudinal effects of genetic engineering. I also think we need to avoid NIMBYism. So this stands for not in my backyard. So this is the same thing that happens with windmills. People want wind power, but they don't want the windmills in their backyard. People want fewer mosquitoes, but they don't want the genetically engineered mosquitoes introduced in their backyard. So maybe these mosquitoes get introduced in a disadvantaged community where people don't have as much of a voice, and we have to avoid that at all costs. Moving on to gene therapy. So gene therapy is the altering of genes of a diseased individual to cure a genetic disorder. So we can see there's two types here. This is just two examples. So the first is gene augmentation therapy, and this is where you have a cell that has a gene that's not functional, and you insert a functional gene, and then you have a normally functioning cell. Another type is gene inhibition therapy, which is when you have a cell that has a faulty gene, you insert a blocking gene, and then the new gene product will block the faulty gene, and you'll have a normally functioning cell. There are a lot of ethical issues surrounding gene therapy. So the first is that there can be serious and unknown side effects to this treatment. There was a trial that was using gene therapy to treat children with an immunodeficiency disorder, and 5 patients got cancer and 1 of them died. This can also lead to eugenics, which is attempts to manage genetics of a human population for quote-unquote desired traits. So I put a picture up here on the right of a film called Gattaca. And if you haven't seen Gattaca, you should. It's amazing. It's a science fiction film basically about a world in the future where society is based on eugenics. And the main character, played by Ethan Hawke, his parents decided not to have, essentially not to have genetic traits selected for him, so to have it left up to fate or left up to biology, and how he kind of faces genetic discrimination in his life. And the title of Gattaca comes from the first 4 letters of the 4 nucleobases: guanine, adenine, thymine, and cytosine. So this kind of leads to this big question: should we intervene in evolution by removing genetic defects from the population? And this has some more questions, which lead to more ethical issues. So who decides what is normal? Would this be only for the rich? Would it be very expensive and prevent people who don't have a lot of money from getting gene therapy, and then these people wouldn't have the same advantages of the people who do have this kind of gene therapy? Will we become less accepting of people who are different? And again, we have incomplete knowledge. Some genes are harmful in some ways, but may be advantageous under different conditions. And we don't know what's going to happen in the future or how Earth will change, so this could backfire later. And my last slide, why are these ethical concerns important? So technology can have huge and unintended consequences on society, and these are not always good. This makes me think about how Facebook has changed how we communicate with each other, how the internet has changed how we communicate with each other. There's been a lot of good changes, but there's probably been some bad changes too. And additionally, this is a very new technology, so there are no long-term studies. We don't really know what the long-term effects could be, and not only like biological effects, but also societal effects. And again, the public generally has a pretty poor understanding of science, so we really need better science communication. We need to be able to bridge that gap between scientists and engineers and the public, so people really understand what DNA technology and gene therapy are, so that people can make informed choices. And what you can see on the right here, this is Pandora's box. So when you open Pandora's box, you have a lot of complex and unexpected problems emerge. So this is kind of how I see gene therapy and the ethical concerns related to it. So thank you very much for listening to my presentation.